We don't want money going out to sponsor terror. They are the number one sponsor of terror anywhere in the world. So I'll sign this order right now, and I want to thank our military. I want to thank all of the people that have been working with me over the last number of months on this. I think a lot of restraint has been shown by us, a lot of restraint, and that doesn't mean we're going to show it in the future.
All right, the president signing an order imposing new sanctions on Iran, oil dropping on this news. Agri-financial market strategist Alan Nuckman joining us on this. I'm still having a tough time, Alan, finding exactly what additional measures we're taking here. I understand we're removing the waivers that we granted 8 countries that were doing business with Iran to get its oil, right, including China and India. Beyond that, I'm a little bit at a loss, but obviously the intent here is to even further crack down on how revenues get to Iran, and this makes it very difficult. That's the upshot, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at this as more symbolic than anything else. Sanctions, it's something to talk about. We're stepping up the pressure. But I try and simplify all these moving parts by simply looking at the price. So we've seen a pause in price, as we've seen a pause in the macro market as well here with the S&P right now holding around this 2960 after making new all-time highs last week. We had a delayed reaction in crude oil. Now, crude oil, if you simplify it down to its basics, you can look at the price and see that we traded between 50 and 55 for almost 3 weeks. Before that breakout last week, we rallied 10%, as now it's starting to play catch up to the rest of the macro market in the fact that the concerns of the global slowdown are not there. And looking at the board, we're going to get a rate cut, so that should stop the dollar from going higher, and that could be a positive for crude and the market once again.
Alan, I can just remember times, because A, I'm so much older than you, where even a threat of something like this happening would have whipsawed.
In the old days.
In the old days, right? And those days, right. I mean, you never like to say it's different this time, but clearly the reaction is very different than what you would normally associate, a Middle East quasi-crisis,
Right, and that's because, that's not our oil. That oil goes elsewhere.
Right.
Now, we're always on kind of a razor's edge as far as oil supply, and any disruption around the world has impact in the global economy and in the oil markets here as well. Maybe not as extensively as we used to have when we were both younger traders, but it's important now that we hold above this 55 level. 60 was the drop from the top. If you remember, we had an accelerated drop a couple months ago when we broke below that 60 support. So markets often come back to their breakout points. Let's see if we can come back to that 60 level. I still think there's a lot more upside in this crude market. And like I talk about, there are other components, other pieces of this puzzle that are very much positive for assets. And the fact that the pressure to lower interest rates is really heating up. And we've got, the dollar, drifting lower, and the stock market is back up at the all-time highs once again. So, as we've seen before, you can't break the market. Now, I love your interview with the Home Depot guys, and I like how they've come to the conclusion. Years ago, if you play the tape from 2012, I think it was, they were convinced if Obama got elected that the market would crash. Now they realize the market's going to do what the market's going to do, and I love that optimism of the fact that the stock market still has a lot of upside potential, regardless or irregardless, which is not a word, of what happens elsewhere.
Yeah, they've said, they can't hazard any guess, depending on what the president says, who's predicted that if he's not reelected, the market will crash. They said, well, markets do what they do. All good musings for a young fellow like yourself. Alan, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Alan Nuckman. All right, so our sanctions against Iran, our best non-military tactic and strategy, to former USS Cole Commander Kirkland Pope. First of all,